Hey everyone! In today's video, we're going to talk about how to use and test uncensored LLM models using Unsloth Studio. So here's something most people run into pretty quickly when they start working with AI chat tools. You ask something a little sensitive. Maybe you're writing fiction, maybe you're doing research, maybe you just want to explore a topic that's a bit edgy, and the model just refuses. It either throws up a generic warning or completely sidesteps the question. And for a lot of legitimate use cases, that's genuinely frustrating. Things like creative writing with NSFW themes, role-play scenarios, security research, or just asking detailed questions about topics that commercial models tend to flag automatically. Services like ChatGPT and Gemini are built with heavy guardrails baked in, and there's really no way around that. They're not going to generate NSFW content, full stop. But open source models are a different story. There are models out there that have been trained or fine-tuned specifically without those restrictions, so they'll actually engage with NSFW or otherwise sensitive prompts that a commercial model would refuse outright. You can run them yourself, locally or in the cloud, without any of the content filtering that commercial products apply. That's where Unsloth Studio comes in. It's a tool that makes it fairly straightforward to load and run these kinds of models without needing to be a machine learning engineer. I'm going to walk you through how to get Unsloth Studio set up, how to pick and load an uncensored model, and how to actually interact with it. By the end, you'll have a clear picture of how to run these models yourself and see what they can do when the guardrails are off. So, Unsloth Studio is a web-based interface that lets you load, fine-tune, and chat with open-source language models without writing any code. It's essentially a graphical front end built on top of the Unsloth library. It handles the technical setup for you so you can go from picking a model to actually running it in just a few clicks. Now, the distinction between Unsloth Studio and Unsloth Core is worth knowing. Unsloth Core is the underlying Python library, the thing developers actually import into their code to speed up training and fine-tuning of models. It's a toolkit you work with programmatically. Unsloth Studio, on the other hand, wraps all of that into a visual interface, so you don't have to write any code at all. Think of it this way. Unsloth Core is the engine, and Unsloth Studio is the dashboard sitting on top of it. If you're comfortable with Python and want full control, you'd use the core library directly. But if you just want to load a model and start talking to it, Studio is the faster, more accessible way to get there. Now, there are basically two ways to run Unsloth Studio. The first is to run it locally on your own machine, and the second is to run it in the cloud using a GPU rental service like RunPod or Vast.AI. If you happen to have a decent GPU already, somewhere in the range of 8 gigabytes of VRM up to 32 gigabytes, then running it locally is completely doable. You just set it up on your own hardware and go from there. But honestly, most people don't have that kind of setup sitting around at home. And buying a GPU powerful enough to run these models comfortably can run you anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000, depending on what you go with. That's a real investment, and it doesn't make sense for everyone. So in this video, we're going to focus on the cloud approach, which lets you spin up a powerful GPU on demand, pay for only the time you actually use, and get things running without buying any hardware at all. It keeps the upfront cost pretty low. For those of you who already have a powerful GPU at home and want to run everything completely locally, I'll put together a separate video walking through that setup specifically. So let's get things running on RunPod. If you haven't used it before, RunPod is basically a cloud platform where you rent GPU power by the hour. You pick the hardware you want, you pick a template, which is essentially a pre-configured environment with all the software already set up. And RunPod spins up a machine for you. You pay for the time you use, and when you're done, you just stop it. Pretty straightforward. When you go to create a new pod, you'll see two main things to configure: the template and the GPU. The template defines what software gets loaded onto the machine. And for this setup, you can use the one linked directly in the description of this video. That'll save you from having to configure anything manually. For the GPU, I'm going to be selecting the RTX 5090. At the time of recording, that runs about 90 cents per hour, which is pretty reasonable given what you're getting. Now, the 5090 is the option I'll be using here, but you're not locked into that. If you want to keep costs lower, you can go with something like a 3090, which will cost less per hour. Or if you want more headroom and faster performance, you can step up to something like an RTX 6000. It really just depends on what you're comfortable spending and how quickly you want things to run. Once you've selected your template and your GPU, you're basically ready to launch. Once the pod is running, you typically don't have to wait long, usually under 5 minutes, before Unsloth Studio is ready to go. In your RunPod container, you'll see a connect option. When you click that, there should be a link for Unsloth Studio available on port 8000. You want to wait until the status shows is ready before clicking it. Once it does, click the link and it'll take you straight to the Unsloth Studio web interface. From there, you'll be prompted to set a password. Just enter a password and confirm it, but it can be whatever you want. That's all you need to get into the main interface. Now, alongside the Unsloth Studio link, you'll also notice a Jupyter notebook link. Jupyter is basically an interactive coding environment that runs in the browser. It lets you browse files, look at folder structures, and run code if you want to. In this context, it's mostly useful if you want to poke around the files that make up Unsloth Studio, or make manual changes to anything. You don't need it just to use the interface, but it's there if you want it. Here's the thing though. If you click the Jupyter link right now, it's going to ask you for a password, and that password is set separately from the Unsloth Studio one. To set it, go back to RunPod and look for the secrets section. Add a new secret, use Jupyter password as the variable name, and set the value to whatever password you want to use. One thing worth being precise about, the variable name needs to be typed exactly as Jupyter_password. If you spell it differently or use a space instead of an underscore, it won't be picked up correctly, so just double check that before moving on. This secret needs to be set before you launch the container, not after. The value gets read when the container starts up, so if your container is already running when you add it, it won't take effect. If that's the situation you're in, go ahead and set the variable in secrets first, then you'll need to relaunch. To do that, click on your container, hit stop, and then terminate it. And make sure you fully terminate it, not just stop it. If you only stop the container without terminating, it can still accumulate charges. Once it's fully terminated, you can spin up a new one with the secret already in place, and the Jupyter password will work as expected from the start. Once that's saved, go back and click the Jupyter link again, enter that password, and you should be able to navigate through the file structure from there. Alright, back in Unsloth Studio. To get a model loaded, you want to find the Select Models option, and click on that. From there, you can search for any model that's available on Hugging Face. The full repository is accessible, so there's a lot to choose from. Let me walk you through some solid options depending on what you're actually trying to do, without getting too deep into the technical weeds. And if your use case is NSFW roleplay or creative writing, two models worth knowing about are Nous Hermes 3 and Llama 3.2 Dark Champion. Now Hermes 3 is built on a Llama 3.2 base, and it's generally considered one of the better options for this kind of thing right now. The main thing about it is that it won't push back on your prompts or add little ethical disclaimers. It just engages with what you give it. It handles longer narratives well and tends to stay consistent with characters over a conversation. Dark Champion is a bit different in its approach. It's been specifically tuned to not refuse anything, which makes it a good fit if you want something with basically no guardrails at all. And if you want another option in this category, obliterated versions of Gemma 4 are also worth trying. They perform pretty well for uncensored roleplay scenarios. If what you need is something for more technical or sensitive topics, things like security research, penetration testing, or detailed chemistry questions, then Dolphin 3.0 is a good starting point. It comes from a series that's specifically built around compliance, meaning it'll actually answer those kinds of questions without lecturing you about why it shouldn't. So just search for whichever of these fits what you're trying to do, pull it down, and you'll be ready to start running it. Now, one practical thing to pay attention to before you actually download a model is whether it'll fit on the GPU you're running. Unsloth Studio gives you a signal on this. If a model has an OOM tag next to it, that means out of memory, so your current GPU doesn't have enough VRAM to load it. Anything that doesn't show that tag should be able to run fine on your setup. So just keep an eye on that before you commit to downloading something. For this example, I'm going to search for a Gemma 4 obliterated model to walk through an NSFW roleplay use case. When you type that into the Search Models section, you'll get a list of results back. Pretty much any model that's on Hugging Face can be found this way, so the search is quite broad. That said, sometimes a search just doesn't surface what you're looking for. Maybe the name is slightly different or the results are off. When that happens, a reliable workaround is to go directly to the model's Hugging Face page and copy the exact repo ID. Every model on Hugging Face has one. It's basically the unique identifier for that model in the format of the creator's name followed by the model name. There's usually a button on the page to copy it. Now you'll notice this particular model is listed as a GGUF model. GGUF is a file format designed specifically for running language models efficiently on consumer hardware. Think of it as a compressed, optimized packaging of the model that's easier to load and run compared to the raw training format, which is called safe tensors. Safe tensors is typically what you'd use if you're doing further training or fine-tuning on a model. GGUF is more about inference, just running the model and talking to it, and it's generally more memory-friendly. When you click on a GGUF model, you'll see several versions to choose from. Things like Q4, Q8, and FP16. These refer to how much the model has been compressed. Q4 means the model's weights have been quantized down to 4-bit precision. It's the smallest and fastest option, uses the least memory, but you do give up a little quality. As a general rule, if you're on a mid-range GPU, Q4 or Q8 are your practical options. If you have a lot of VRAM to work with, FP16 will give you the cleanest output. So the specific model I'm going with here is Gemma 431B Uncensored Heretic. I'll drop the Hugging Face repo link in the description if you want to look at it more closely. Just paste the repo ID into the Search Models tab the same way we covered, and it'll come up. From there, I'm selecting the Q4 version of the GGUF, good balance of performance and memory use for this setup. Once the download kicks off, you just wait for it to finish and then you can start chatting. And this is where things get interesting. I sent it some prompts. Asked if it would do NSFW roleplay, asked it to take on a girlfriend persona, and do some dirty talking, and it just did it. No refusals, no warnings, no redirects. Compare that to Gemini, which won't touch that kind of prompt at all, and you can really feel the difference. We went through a full back-and-forth conversation with it, and it stayed engaged the whole way through. Just so you know the context here, Gemma 431B is actually an open-source model originally from Google. What you're running here is a version that another user has taken and trained to remove those built-in restrictions so the underlying model is Google's, but the behavior you're seeing is the result of that additional training. And it doesn't stop at roleplay. I also asked it things like how to make explosives and how to break into other computers, and it answered those too. Fully, without any of the deflection you'd get from a commercial model. Stuff like that is just completely off the table with something like ChatGPT or Gemini, but here it goes right through. So really the only limit is what you decide to ask. If there's a question you've been frustrated about not being able to get a straight answer on from a private model, this is the kind of setup where you can actually try it. All right, that wraps up this video. I hope it gave you a clear picture of how to get this running for yourself. Coming up in future videos, we'll go further. Things like training your own LoRa model on a custom character for a full persona setup, and a lot more to explore beyond that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.